I think we're ready to go. Well, hello and thank you for joining us. This is Water Stories, sharing experiences to spark shared action. My name is Wendy Tremblay, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager with Wild Rivers Conservancy. I will be in the background today moderating and helping with the chat or any technical difficulties that happen during the session. Before we begin, I just want to share a couple of housekeeping notes. On the right of your screen, you'll see the chat box. To keep things simple today, chat is where we would like you to share your questions and any comments that you might have throughout the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, we encourage you to type those questions into the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded and will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube channel. With the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce our speaker and give the rest of the time to them. So please welcome Angela Hugunin, with Minnesota GreenCorps member with We Are Water, Minnesota. Welcome, Angela.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Hi, everyone. I am delighted to be here with you all today. Thanks, Wendy, for that introduction. So I will briefly just introduce myself and get us going here. A little disclaimer, this is my first time with Feed Loop, so thanks for bearing with me if we do have any little hiccups as we go. So today we're going to be talking about water stories, and I think I got to listen into a couple of the sessions this morning, and I think there's some really cool thematic overlap, but I hope that this will be an enriching way to think about the role of story as we think about climate action and what that can look like. So my name is Angela, as Wendy said. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Minnesota GreenCorps member, which is basically an 11-month service term. You're placed in an organization where you're doing environmental work for that 11-month period. And I get to work on a program that's called We Are Water, Minnesota. So I'll tell you a little more about that today in a little bit, but I would like to move us forward here. So thanks for being here. And again, as Wendy said, if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to put those in the chat. So thanks for being here, everyone. All right, so to kind of get us prepped to move forward, this is the central question I would love for us to explore today. And that is, how can storytelling move us toward shared climate action? Climate action that is inclusive, that is personal, that is relevant to people in different communities. And so as we're considering this question, I'm not necessarily going to just give us answers, but I'm hoping we can kind of dig in together today. If you're with other people, maybe you can have some discussions with classmates or people around you. And so as we're considering this today, we are going to hear 3 different storytellers who are featured in this exhibit that I get to work on, We Are Water, Minnesota. We're going to hear from them about the ways that they connect to water in their community. And then we're also going to think a little more specifically about what this means as we're considering climate change. So we are going to have 3 different audio stories that we listen to, and those will each be about 3 minutes long. And then we'll have some time to discuss a little bit, or if you're by yourself, you can just do some thinking, maybe jot down some notes. And then we will move into a little more time of thinking critically about what action looks like as we move forward. So that's kind of the flow of what we'll do today. And because we're talking about water stories, I would like to kick things off with one of those. So bear with me for a moment here as we get this audio up so we can listen to it. But we will be hearing from someone named Sharon Day. And Sharon was featured, or is featured actually, where the exhibit currently is in Duluth, Minnesota. And so we're going to, again, listen to this audio clip, and this one's only just over 2 minutes long. So I want you to think as you listen. I'll also have the words on the screen so we can read if that's helpful for people to see the words Sharon is saying. And then we'll go through those slides, and then we'll have some discussion time. So let's go ahead and we will listen to Sharon Day.
That mist that's outside today, the water that's in Lake Superior.
Oh, sorry, everybody.
The water that they drink, that's the same water, that our ancestors drank. It's the same water that our great, all the way back to the beginning of time, grandparents drank. And in that way, it goes into the earth and comes back up to the ground and into our groundwater, and we drink it, and then we put it back into the earth, and same thing happens, and and it rises, and the dew in the morning and rises and into the sky realm, it becomes clouds and comes back down as rain or snow. That's the same water, and in that way, like, we are the ancestors, and we're also the ancestors to come. And if we wish to have that cycle repeat itself, we have to do our part to take care of the water, because it is all dependent upon the water. I ask sometimes young people to think about their favorite body of water, draw a picture of it maybe. Lately, I've been asking people uh, to write a love letter to the water, and really to feel that connection, to verbalize it, to talk about it. And also, we only take care of that which we love. And so, if we can, really every day, that morning before we take that first drink of water, to say, Glitch, water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you. I think that would go a long way to really making people be more connected to the water.
I'm sorry to jump in like this.
And then maybe not do so much damage.
Hi. I'm sorry to jump in like this, but Wendy, I think you forgot to hit enable stream.
When my family coming and crossing the Mekong River into Thailand, and
oh no,
as
thanks,
a
Katrina.
It's awfully dangerous to cross. Now,
Oh.
Yep.
Enable screen. Where is enable screen? I didn't see that.
So, Angela, if you want to go back to your first slide, you'll just redo this over again.
Okay.
Oh no.
That's okay.
We're gonna redo.
No worries. So
Okay.
broadcast is hit. The next thing you need to do is up at the top it says enable stream. I'm going to turn my camera off so no one can see me. But yep, click that enable stream button and that'll make you live.
Oh, I see it. Okay. We'll just start from the beginning.
Yep.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
Katrina.
Katrina.
No problem.
You were doing great.
Thank you. We get a redo.
All right. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so
No,
broadcast
good.
and then enable stream. So then we'll start from the beginning. That was just a test run. Now we know everything works.
There we go. We're rolling. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Katrina.
There we go. Okay. I don't see that when I have you on the screen. That's why.
Ah, okay.
Okay,
No worries.
enable screen.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for your patience, everybody. My name is Wendy Tremblay, and I'm with Wild Rivers Conservancy as a community engagement manager. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Water Stories, sharing experiences to spark shared action. I will be in the background moderating this session today, helping with any technical difficulties during the session. Before we begin, I'd like to mention just a few housekeeping notes. On the right of your screen, you'll see a chat box. And to keep things simple today, chat is where we would like you to share your questions and comments. If you have any questions during the presentation, we encourage you to type those questions into the chat and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded and will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube channel. With the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce our speaker and give the rest of the time to them. So please welcome Angela Hugunin, Minnesota GreenCorps member with We Are Water, Minnesota. Thanks for being here, Angela.
Thanks so much, Wendy. I'm happy to be here. Thank you to everyone who's here with us today. And thanks for bearing with us as we navigate different screens and feed loop and all of that. I, again, am delighted to be with you all. My name is Angela. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Minnesota GreenCorps member. So for those who are not familiar with GreenCorps, it's an AmeriCorps program that's environmentally focused. And so members like myself are placed with an organization for an 11-month service term, and we work on various environmental initiatives. So I have the good fortune of getting to work with a traveling exhibit that's called We Are Water Minnesota. And so that's sort of where this content today is coming from. We have a lot of really wonderful water stories that are part of the exhibit, and I'm excited to explore how these stories can be relevant as we're talking about climate change, and also as we're thinking about the stories related to water and climate that each of us might have as well. So without further ado, I would love to dive in. And here is the central question that we'll be exploring today. How can storytelling move us toward climate action? So as we are considering this question, we are going to be listening to 3 different audio stories that have previously been featured in the We Are Water Minnesota exhibit. So we'll hear brief audio clips from them between 2 and 3 minutes long. And these stories are not necessarily meant to show one particular way of thinking about water or thinking about climate, but rather to be sort of a starting point for more discussion about these things as we're thinking about how to engage with these really important issues. So we're going to listen to these audio stories. We are going to have a little bit of time to discuss or jot some notes down if you're by yourself. And then we'll look a little more concretely at what action can look like as we're working to protect water and protect our climate moving forward. So as Wendy said, if you do have questions, please feel free to type those into the chat at any point. And otherwise, I would like to begin our time with an audio story. So we're going to hear from Sharon Day. Thanks for bearing with me as I toggle screens here. And Sharon, Sharon Day is an enrolled member of the Boys Fort Band of Ojibwe. She is actually featured in our current, thanks everybody for bearing with me here. She is featured in our current hosting of the exhibit, and it is up in Duluth at Hartley Nature Center at the moment. But Sharon Day is actually from Center City, so closer to probably where many of you are joining us from today. So as you're listening to Sharon, and I will put the words she's saying on the screen as well so we can follow along if that's easier for folks. As you're listening, I just invite you to jot down any notes, any phrasing that maybe stands out to you or things that resonate, and then we'll have a little discussion time at the end. So here is Sharon Day.
That mist that's outside today, the water that's in Lake Superior, the water that they drink, that's the same water, that our ancestors drank. It's the same water that our great, all the way back to the beginning of time, grandparents drank. And in that way, it goes into the earth and comes back up through the ground and into our groundwater, and we drink it, and then we put it back into the earth, and the same thing happens, and it rises, and the dew in the morning and rises and into the sky realm, it becomes clouds and comes back down as rain or snow. That's the same water. And in that way, like, we are the ancestors, and we're also the ancestors to come. And if we wish to have that cycle repeat itself, we have to do our part to take care of the water, because it is all dependent upon the water. I ask sometimes young people to think about their favorite body of water, draw a picture of it maybe. Lately, I've been asking people to write a love letter to the water, and really to feel that connection, to verbalize it, to talk about it. And also, we only take care of that which we love. And so, if we can, really every day that morning before we take that first drink of water, to say Miigwech. Water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you. I think that would go a long way to really making people be more connected to the water, getting them to be connected to the water, and then maybe to not do so much damage.
When I think of water,
Thanks for bearing
it
with
draws
me.
me back to
It always goes really suddenly to that next one. So I appreciate your patience. Okay, so thanks for engaging with this audio story from Sharon Day. I would like for us to take, let's say until 1:49, 1:50. So a couple minutes here. If you have someone nearby that you can discuss this with, that would be wonderful. You can also jot down notes about these questions, whatever works. You all know the setting that you're in better than I do. But I would just invite you to kind of think about this story a little more deeply. So some questions to consider. Was there a part of Sharon Day's story that most resonated with you as we heard from her? Have you ever said thank you to water? And what is one body of water that you love? I love this line that Sharon Day had of, we only take care of that which we love. And so I think this is a really interesting entry point into this discussion we're having today. So again, let's go ahead and take a couple moments here just to think a little more deeply about this. And if you do have someone nearby that you can have a conversation with, please go ahead and do that. If you have any thoughts or responses you'd like to share in the chat, please be our guest, and feel empowered to add things into the chat. Otherwise, I'll give you a couple moments here to ponder these and think a little more deeply. All right, we'll maybe take a couple more moments here. Ooh, I'm seeing a chat from Wendy. Thanks, Wendy, for sharing. I love Lake Superior. The openness and large scale make me feel small in a good way. Yes, that resonates with me a lot too, Wendy. Thank you for sharing. I love, actually, when we moved the exhibit up to Duluth, a couple of us from the exhibit moving team went into the lake in February, which was into Lake Superior. It was a shocking experience, but really a great way to wake up and feel very alive and feel very cognizant of the power of a body of water like Lake Superior. And Jamie says, the wetland where I lived for a year in grad school. I enjoyed bird watching, kayaking, and just gazing at it from my window. That's really lovely. Thanks for sharing that. That sounds like a beautiful place and a very peaceful place to go and feel centered and connected. So I appreciate people sharing. Feel free to continue as we go. Otherwise, I will keep us moving for the sake of time here. Okay, so this was Sharon Day, and we have 2 more stories to engage with as we go. But as we move forward, and now that we're a bit more in a space of storytelling, I'd like to share a little bit more about what We Are Water is and how we get these stories, what is this exhibit. So to give us a little more background, We Are Water Minnesota encompasses a few things, but it's primarily a traveling exhibit. So you can see this on the left-hand side of your screen. This is what the exhibit looks like where it is currently up at Hartley Nature Center in Duluth. And so we bring these big pieces, like a mini museum, to different communities throughout the state of Minnesota. And each time the exhibit moves, some of the content changes so it can be more locally focused. So we ask the local partners, what's going on in your community that you're concerned about? And then there are interviews that are conducted with community members to really center local voices. There are also events that happen in the community. And so this is kind of the We Are Water format, for lack of a better word. And this is a little context of what's going on. But the whole project really seeks to get people thinking about their relationships with water and then their responsibilities to water. And so this is kind of a parallel I'd like to keep us with as well today, as we're thinking about the role of story in climate action and in protecting our waters. So this question we still haven't fully answered. You might be thinking, where does story come in with this whole exhibit thing? This is to give you a little more background. So We Are Water so far has been in 35 communities throughout the state of Minnesota. Although if you're joining us from somewhere that's not Minnesota, this is still relevant to you. It's just that this particular exhibit is based in Minnesota. We have now had over 100,000 people visit the exhibit, which I think is really exciting because they're learning about water, they're getting to ask questions about water, and they're getting to interact with other people. And this last number is what I really want to draw our attention to. Over 496 audio stories have been gathered so far with this project. And so this looks like hearing from people like Sharon Day and the other community members we will be learning from today. And so a big part of this is really, again, connecting people and getting them to think about their relationship with water and how that can then lead to a responsibility to water. So these numbers also don't capture the unofficial stories that our exhibit visitors share. So in the exhibit, there are also opportunities for visitors who weren't interviewed prior to share their own water story. So on the left-hand side, you can see a watershed map, and that invites visitors to point out places from the watershed that are special to them, or that they might have a water story with or a water memory from. And then on the right-hand side, you can see an invitation for people to select an action that they want to take to protect water. So again, in our program, this is part of our efforts to build people's relationships with and responsibilities to water. And so what does it all mean when we're talking about storytelling and our talk today? Well, all of this proximity to stories that we have from the exhibit or related events has brought something to our attention. Community members throughout the state, throughout various communities, have already shared that they are seeing and living the impacts of climate change on our waters. They are sharing what this looks like, how maybe their ways of life have had to shift due to these climate impacts, and they're sharing how they're grappling with these changes. I recently read an article that was from the Citizens Climate Lobby website, and it was about the importance of talking about climate change and how we have a tendency to maybe think we're talking a lot about climate change, but in reality, we might not be talking enough about it, or maybe we're not talking about it in ways that are impactful. And so when we talk about something, we help share with people around us that this is something that is relevant, it's important, and it's something that we care about. And so talking about something, telling stories about something makes it more relevant and makes it more real. So this would be an invitation kind of I would give us today as we move forward. And I want to take a brief moment to ground us in an understanding of what's happening with climate change and our waters. Again, this says Minnesota, but if you were in other places nearby, you are probably having very similar effects happening to your waters. So we know that Minnesota's lakes and nearby lakes are warming. Our waters in general are warming. And so in the months of July and August in particular, we're starting to see anywhere between 3 and 3.9 degrees Fahrenheit of warming when compared with the times from over 50 years ago, which may not feel like that big of a change, but if we're thinking about ecosystems and the plants and animals that are dependent on these waters, that's a pretty stark contrast. We also know that our Midwestern landscapes are losing ice. And so in the last 50 years, ice cover on our lakes, our rivers, our streams has dropped by about 10 to 14 days. So again, this might not feel like that big of a shift, but when we think about the span of 50 years, that's a relatively short window of time. And so as we're thinking about this, I would invite, maybe let's just take a minute or so here to jot down some ideas. You can type things in the chat. If you have someone nearby, you can discuss this with them. But I would love to know, why does this matter in light of some of these impacts we're hearing about? And then what sort of impacts do you think we might see on our waters in particular due to climate change? So let's take a moment here. I will bring us back shortly, but you can either write some notes for yourself, you can type it in the chat, you can discuss if you have someone nearby, and then I'll bring us back shortly here. Okay, for the sake of time, I will move us forward, but please feel free to send things in the chat if you have any ideas you would like to share. Otherwise, this is just a starting point of what these impacts look like for our waters in particular, and then I'll move us a little more broadly to impacts from climate change. More broadly, not just on water. But we know, and we're already seeing, that climate change is bringing more invasive species to our waters, more algae, which can mean less oxygen that's available for the creatures and the plants that call our waters home, a loss of fish, and a loss of lifeways and recreation. When I use the word lifeways, one example that comes to mind to kind of illustrate this is that there was someone named Jeff Savage who was interviewed in Duluth, and he is with the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe, and he talks about wild rice, or Minnesotan. And throughout his whole life, he has gone and harvested this Minnesotan, this wild rice, and that is part of his cultural heritage and an ongoing practice that he does with his community. And he was sharing that the changing climate and pollution that is increasingly in our waters is having some rather devastating impacts on the way that they practice this wild rice harvesting. And so that could be one thing to consider as we're considering impacts to our waters from climate change. But the real thing that I want us to sit with is this idea that water is something that we all need, right? And so as we're considering climate impacts, this is something to keep in mind. All of us need water. I won't linger here for very long, but this is a look at some more broad sweeping climate impacts. We are seeing that Minnesota and neighboring states over time, we're getting warmer and wetter, so more precipitation. We're seeing impacts on agriculture. We are seeing an increase in extreme weather events, and so things related to stormwater. What does it look like when there is flooding or when there is maybe drought? I'm not going to go over all of these, but we do have a link to this site in a document that you all have access to. So if you'd like to go look at more of what's happening, what are the scientists finding related to climate in our region, I do invite you to give that a closer look. I would like to bring us to our next storyteller, who is named Michael Anderson. And just as we enter into this, I want to recognize that talking about climate and thinking about climate change can be sometimes overwhelming. These are often very heavy topics. And so as we're thinking about our changing climate and how we may already be seeing impacts in our communities, I would like to introduce us to this storyteller, because his story kind of meets us in that space of feeling overwhelmed, feeling a lot of big feelings about the climate situation we're going through. And he shares about one time in particular that he struggled with these feelings, and then how he found ways to move forward with those feelings. So same thing as before. I invite you to take notes if anything sticks out to you, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some further reflection and or discussion. So we will hear from Michael Anderson here. And it'll take me just a moment to get us over. to his story. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Okay, we will hear from Michael Anderson.
My name is Michael Anderson, and I am a Mississippi River rat. Currently, I guide people on kayak tours in the flooded forests of the Driftless region, just south of Lake Pepin. It was my freshman year of college at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities here, which of course the river runs right through campus there. And I was a biology degree seeking student at the time, and every single lecture and class discussion, slideshows, the PowerPoints, it was all about this ecological destruction and devastation at the hands of human beings. And it was depressing. Yeah, it didn't make me want to get out of bed. And I didn't for many, many days. And eventually was brought, went with a friend and my mom actually to the health clinic at the U of M. And they had offered to put me on pharmaceuticals, medications, and I just felt a lot of resistance at that point in my life to those and didn't want to go forward with that. And so the topic of this mindfulness-based stress reduction course was introduced. That kind of brought into my life this walking meditation. We would meet for a few hours once a week in a group and practice these techniques. And from there, it was, you were supposed to go out on your own and just kind of keep practicing. It was literally left foot after right foot, left foot after right foot, feeling, from heel to toe and monitoring my breath. So I kind of took that walking meditation technique and went down to the Mississippi River in the heart of winter, this sort of desolate, cold, uninviting environment just seemed to match my internal landscape at the time. And just kept practicing, kept staying with it, watching the water, watching the icicles melting on the bluff banks. Just at the U of M campus there's 30-foot icicles that sort of gather and accumulate on the bluffs. It's a sight to behold. They started melting. My heart started melting. I started just kind of relaxing out of that winter and depression, and the river just worked its magic. The birds starting to come back and the ice starting to break, the water starting to flow, the eagles chirping, it really wrapped me in and I was hooked. I haven't been off the river for more than a week or next to the river since then. It's been definitely a strong anchor in my life.
Michael Anderson's story was produced by me, Melissa Townsend.
My name.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So that was Michael Anderson's story. And so I would like to share a few questions for some further reflection. It's the same format as what we did with Sharon Day's story here. So again, you can write some notes for yourself, type things in the chat, or discuss if you have someone nearby. Michael talks about proximity to the Mississippi River in particular being something that sort of helped him weather these internal storms he was experiencing as he was grappling with what to do in the face of something as seemingly vast as climate change. So when you think about climate change, what is worrisome or frightening? Conversely, what is exciting or reassuring? And when you feel overwhelmed, what helps you find peace and motivation to keep going? So this one might be a little more personal. You don't have to share anything if you don't want to, but just to take a moment here to kind of ponder this as we're reflecting on how to take action that is authentic and meaningful. So I will leave us maybe a minute or so here. Take some time to discuss or jot down some notes or share in the chat. Thanks, everybody. I'm seeing some responses in the chat. Thank you, Wendy. Wendy says, I get overwhelmed thinking about my kids' future, but love hearing the positive stories of change from both youth and adults. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Wendy. That can be very overwhelming. And I know personally, hearing from our keynote speaker this morning, the conservation kid, that was so encouraging to hear about youth getting involved and taking action. Absolutely. Jamie says, frightening how it impacts those most marginalized, poor, people of color, indigenous, etc., versus hopeful how communities can come together to find creative and just solutions. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. I agree. It's can be tough sometimes to balance those different poles of emotion. And I would say, as we're thinking about Michael's story in particular and then how it relates, each of us copes with climate change in different ways. And so finding ways for us to engage with this and cope with things, or find strategies that help us make sense of what's going on so that we can move forward meaningfully in a way that is hopefully just for these communities you pointed out, Jamie, that are too often marginalized. And actually our next audio story touches on some of these themes. So this is Diver Van Avery, who was interviewed also for our most recent host site. And Diver mentions how they sort of make sense of these two different poles, right? Of making sense of, oh gosh, there's a long way to go and this has been really damaging. What's my role in that? And maybe how can I hold hope in the midst of that? So I'm going to let us hear from Diver here. Thanks again for your patience as we navigate tabs. And here we go. Then we'll come back and reflect.
Land, and Sugarloaf Cove is a really powerful site for me because it was a site of industry where a paper company clear cut the land and used it as a site for all the logging that was happening all throughout that region to get the logs into the water to ferry them across the lake to become paper. And I just reflected a lot on that because I'm a writer and I write on paper. And so I participate in the need for that product, and yet see also the ways that logging has completely shaped the kind of history of oppression in our state. And this has shaped a lot of folks' kind of numbness towards ecological devastation. And so I really love Sugarloaf Cove because you can go there and feel like you're in the woods and learn that just decades ago it was clear cut. So it feels like a site of repair and hope, and a site where I know that repair is possible. And I think that as a white person, I need to keep believing that repair is possible for my people, and repair of our authentic, deep relationship with land and water is possible. And as we do that, we link ourselves to other communities that use their cultural understanding and knowledge and ancestral guidance to drive repair of the damages done from white supremacy and industrialization. So it feels all like a powerful loop and web that's been transformative for me.
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening to Diver there. So I'm watching the clock and I want to be mindful of people's time, but I do want to give us a moment to think about some of these questions as well. So Diver talks about the impact of logging on this area of Sugarloaf Cove and being involved in the history of a place that might be oppressive, or that isn't just to certain communities that have been marginalized. And so I would invite you to think about if there are places in your community that bring you a hope of repair, that give you hope for the future, whether that's specifically related to climate or pollution or a different environmental topic. And then with that, are there places in your community where you could participate in that repair? Maybe you're already participating in that repair, but what might it look like to be involved in that? And I'll keep this reflection time pretty brief here. We'll maybe take 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You can jot down some notes or send them in the chat if you would like. Wendy shared in the chat, my kids like to participate in cleanup volunteer events to keep trash out of the water. Yes, that's a beautiful way of being involved in this. And Jamie shares, my mom introduced me to Buy Nothing groups, which are community-based sustainability movements that give me hope of repair to the system. That is really cool. Thank you both for sharing. I've been learning more about both of these. And Wendy, your point makes me think a little bit about our keynote this morning. I think I want to say he shared that he's removed 3 tons of aluminum. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just a staggering amount of trash that he's taken and cleaned up from rivers, which is so inspiring. And these Buy Nothing groups are a really inspiring initiative as well. Okay, thank you both. And feel free others to share. If you have other thoughts, feel free to share those in the chat. Otherwise, we'll keep going for the sake of time. I want to bring us back to our central question before we move to some really more concrete action steps. So our central question was how stories could move us toward action that is climate action that is shared, that is just, and that is also personal. So I would love to know if any of today's storytellers made you consider climate action or water in a different way. So maybe we'll just take a few moments here to kind of mull this over. And I'd also add that these stories aren't meant to show just one right way of doing things, but rather I would invite us to think about how this level of kind of sharing authentically and hearing where other people are coming from can help us gain perspective about what's happening, not only with our changing climate, but also with our waters and all of the shared natural places that we have in common and that we have to preserve. So as we are thinking about this, and I'm going to pause this because I did just see a chat. Thank you, Wendy. Wendy shares, liking Sharon's message of giving thanks to the water. I think that's really beautiful. And one story, super quick, related to this that I recently heard was, it was a parent to 2 young children who was sharing that in their family, whenever they are going over a bridge or they're going for a walk and they pass water in some way, they have started to say thank you to the water, which might sound like a cheesy practice, but this parent shared that, oh my goodness, it's so moving to hear how this seemingly simple exercise has really boosted their awareness of how often we rely on water. And I do wonder what that would look like if we did more of that with, whatever our if it's trees or if it's water or whatever parts of our environment that are precious to us, if we took more time to not only think about them, but also to enter sort of from the space of gratitude. So thank you all for sharing. Okay, we're going to be brief here for the sake of everyone's time, but let's get into talking about what we can do. These ideas are just a starting point as we're thinking about water and its role in climate change and what each of us can do. There is also a resource sheet that should be available on FeedLoop. It's something that your teachers, or if you have access to the site, you can download, and it has just some links to some of these things I'll briefly mention here. And I will just say, take these with a grain of salt. If they work for you, awesome. Let them be a launching point, but you all probably have great ideas about how to take meaningful action in your communities too. really quickly here, help collect data. So we know that data is a key tool in understanding how our waters and how our climate more broadly, how these things are doing and how they're changing. One of the partner agencies of We Are Water is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And so this is the building I come into every day for my work. And they have some volunteering opportunities that are called citizen science. And one of those is volunteer water monitoring. So basically every day people go and they take clarity readings of water. So they send you the equipment for this and you go down basically to your local waters and you just check and see how the water's doing, and you can make other observations. And so this is a great way not only to then share that data so the scientists can kind of have boots on the ground and know what's happening in different communities, but also for you to maybe have a better sense of what's happening with your local waters. So that's one way to get involved. Another really important idea, or rather action step we can take, is sharing our ideas. Share ideas with classmates, with educators, with decision makers, with your family, with other groups you might be a part of. There's also a link in that handout I shared that leads to a site called Our Minnesota Climate. And so again, if you're not in Minnesota, I'm sorry, this could still be relevant to you though. Basically, that is some updates of what's happening at the statewide level, what's happening at local levels as we address what we can do for the climate on a shared level. Keeping our waters clean. This is something that may sound super simple, but I think it's so important as we're considering these big questions. Whether that's organizing a cleanup, like we heard about from the conservation kid today, or like Wendy shared in the chat. Whether that is adopting a storm drain. That's a great way to protect our water, because actually the water that goes down our storm drains does not get treated before it goes into our rivers, our lakes, our streams, our wetlands. So that's a really important way to be involved. And then finally, I would say share your water story, share your climate story, share what you might be worried about when it comes to climate change, share what water bodies or natural places are special to you and what you want to protect. As we're thinking about this last one and thinking about water stories and sharing stories in general, I would bring us back to what Sharon Day said. We only take care of that which we love. And so when we're sharing these things authentically, we can connect more meaningfully and take action that is more just and more in tune with the needs of each of us, right, in our communities. And I want to leave you with this idea that if any of the stories you heard today resonated with you or helped you consider something related to water or climate in a different way, I invite you to remember that your story, your very own story, has potential to hold that same power. So don't underestimate the power of your own water story, regardless of what age you are or what you know or don't know about water or climate. I think there's value in sharing these stories. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry we're kind of going right to time here. Do feel free to send any questions in the chat. And again, I want to thank you for being here. I would also say on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see this, but We Are Water is going to be in Chisago County at the North Branch Area Library, so not too far from this watershed, from June 20th through August 12th of this year. So if you are in the area, do consider checking out either some of the events that are going on or visiting the exhibit for what it's worth. So thank you all so much. I will stick around for questions. Again, I apologize for going just here.
Thank you so much, Angela. I loved hearing all the water stories, and maybe while people are putting some questions in the chat, I just had a curiosity, I guess. I know We Are Water is really known, and one of their big initiatives is gathering these water stories. I'm wondering if you ever collect water stories from youth, or if they are all adults.
Great question, and thank you for your question. Yes, my understanding is that it is typically from adults, but I'm so excited because actually next week we're moving to the exhibit to a community called Holdingford, which is kind of by St. Cloud. And there are 3 students who are actually featured in the exhibit. And I think 2 of them are 14 and 1 is 15. And so they were interviewed. And I know, I wish I had had this one prior to like last week. But they are doing some really cool work in the community, and two of them do storm drain murals. So they are really trying to raise awareness about what's going on with water in their communities. And one of them is a really passionate fisher. He's really into fishing. And so he shares about how important it is to him to protect water so that he can do this hobby he loves so much. So
Very neat. Yeah.
I hope in the future there can be even more youth interviewed. Absolutely.
That's right.
It's so meaningful.
Good. Well, looks like we don't have any other questions at this time. I think I'd like to take the last couple of moments to just thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much, Angela, for being here with us and sharing your story. Thank you for joining us for the 2024 St. Croix Youth Summit. This presentation and all the others will be shared on our Conservancy YouTube channel, and we will send out the links to all registered participants in the coming week or so. And you'll also be receiving a survey tomorrow, so we want to hear from you how we can make this better, what you want to look for next year. If you have any ideas on topics or presenters that you'd like to see, please take a moment to share what you enjoyed and what could be improved. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.